You've seen them. That person sitting alone in a cafe, coffee untouched, eyes somewhere else. Not quite reading, not quite distracted, just there. Or the one walking through the park at sunset. No rush, no phone in hand, just steady, quiet. Almost like they're not part of the noise around them. Maybe it's someone at work, always eats alone, doesn't chase conversation, leaves without needing attention, and without even realizing it, a thought crosses your mind. Are they okay? Because we've been trained to think one thing. If you're alone, something must be wrong. That solitude means loneliness, that choosing to be by yourself is a sign you're missing something. But what if that's completely backwards? What if the person sitting alone isn't disconnected, but more connected than anyone else in the room? What if they're not avoiding people, but protecting something most people don't even realize they've lost? Because here's the truth nobody says out loud. Not everyone who is alone is lonely, and not everyone surrounded by people feels connected. So before you assume, before you label, before you try to fix something, ask yourself this: why would someone choose to be alone on purpose? Because once you understand that, you'll never look at solitude the same way again. The reason that question even exists, are they okay, is not random, it's learned. From the beginning, you were taught that connection equals normal. Make friends, join groups, be part of something. School reinforces it, work depends on it, society rewards it. And over time, a quiet belief forms underneath everything. If you're alone, you're lacking something. Not enough friends, not enough social value, not enough connection. So when someone steps outside that pattern, when they choose distance instead of proximity, silence instead of conversation, it doesn't just look different, it looks wrong. And the modern world has made that even stronger. Because now, it's not just about being connected, it's about being visible. Always online, always responding, always present. Because your value is constantly being measured, replies, likes, views, attention. And if you're not participating in that system, it starts to feel like you're disappearing. So when someone chooses to step away, not because they have to, but because they want to, it creates friction. People don't understand it. Why aren't they engaging? Why are they so quiet? Why don't they show up more? But here's what's really happening. We've been conditioned to confuse noise with connection, to believe that constant interaction equals closeness, to assume that silence equals absence. So when we see someone in solitude, we project lack onto them. We assume something is missing. But what if nothing is missing? What if they've simply stepped out of something that most people are still trapped in? Because once you question that assumption, everything begins to shift. If being alone isn't necessarily a problem, then maybe solitude isn't weakness. Maybe it's something else entirely, something intentional, something chosen. And if that's true, then the real shift isn't in them. It's in how we see it. What if solitude isn't something people fall into, but something they step into? Not by accident, but by choice. Because for some people, being alone isn't uncomfortable. It's necessary. Not because they don't like people, not because they struggle to connect, but because they've experienced something most people ignore. Too much noise, too many conversations that don't go anywhere, too much surface-level interaction, too much pressure to respond, react, and perform. And after a while, that starts to feel exhausting. So they step back, not to disconnect, but to recover. Because solitude gives them something the outside world can't: space. Space to think without interruption, space to feel without influence, space to exist without being watched. No roles to play, no expectations to meet, No need to explain themselves, just stillness. And in that stillness, something starts to come back. Their thoughts become clearer. Their emotions settle. Their decisions become more intentional. Because for the first time in a while, nothing is pulling at them. And that's the part most people miss. Solitude isn't empty. It's full of awareness. It's where you hear your own voice again, without everything else speaking over it. And once someone experiences that, they don't see solitude the same way anymore. They stop fearing it. They start protecting it. Because now it's not just being alone. It's alignment. It's clarity. It's control. So when you see someone choosing solitude, you're not looking at someone who's missing out. You're looking at someone who has learned something, that not all connection adds value, and not all noise deserves attention. And once that realization clicks, everything changes. So now the question becomes deeper. It's no longer, why are they alone? It becomes, what do they understand that most people don't? Because this isn't random behavior, it's intentional. And to understand it, you have to go beyond modern life and look at something much older. At this point, something subtle has already shifted. You're no longer looking at solitude the same way. It doesn't feel like a problem anymore. It feels intentional. And that changes the question completely. Because now it's not, why are they alone? It's, why would someone choose this repeatedly? Not once, not occasionally, but as a pattern, as a way of living, because that's what makes this different. This isn't about someone needing space for a day. This is about people who return to solitude over and over again, almost like they're protecting it, almost like they know something that others don't. Because think about it. Why would someone step away from attention in a world that rewards visibility? Why would someone choose silence in a world that runs on constant input? Why would someone disconnect when everything is designed to keep them engaged? There has to be a reason, and it's not weakness, it's not avoidance, it's not social failure. It's something deeper, because when you strip away all the assumptions, what you're left with is this: choice. And choice always comes from understanding. People don't consistently choose something unless it gives them something valuable, something they can't get anywhere else. And that's where this gets interesting. Because this idea, this pull toward solitude, is not new. It didn't start with social media. It didn't start with burnout. It's been here for centuries, across different cultures, different philosophies, different minds. People stepping away, not to escape life, but to understand it. And once you see that pattern, you realize this isn't isolation. It's discipline. It's awareness. It's a return. To really understand why some people choose to be alone, you have to zoom out, because this behavior, this pull towards silence, has been studied, lived, and practiced long before our time. And once you see how the greatest thinkers approached solitude, you'll start to understand exactly what it gives. Long before notifications, before constant messages, before the pressure to always be on, people were already stepping away, not because they were disconnected, because they were searching for clarity, for control, for something stable in a world that wasn't. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He lived in chaos, war, politics, pressure from every direction. Yet in the middle of all that noise, he wrote to himself about silence, not external silence, internal. He described the mind as a place you can retreat to at any moment, a place untouched by opinion, untouched by pressure, untouched by the world outside. And that's where he would go. Not to escape his responsibilities, but to handle them better. Because he realized something most people don't. If your inner world is unstable, no amount of external control will fix it. So, solitude became a discipline, a way to return to clarity. Seneca saw the same truth from another angle. He lived surrounded by wealth, status, influence, everything people chase, and still, he warned, none of it matters if you can't sit with yourself in peace, because if you need constant noise to feel okay, you're not at peace, you're distracted. And distraction is not stability. So for him, solitude wasn't optional. It was necessary, a way to test yourself, to see who you are, when nothing is entertaining you. Epictetus pushed this even further. He taught that true freedom doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from controlling yourself. And solitude is where that becomes visible, because when you're alone, there's nothing to hide behind, no roles, no audience, no performance, just you. And whatever you bring into that space, that's your reality. If you're restless and you feel it, if you're dependent, you notice it. If you're grounded, it shows. So solitude becomes a mirror, one that doesn't lie. And this idea wasn't limited to Stoicism. Across cultures, you see the same pattern. People stepping away to go deeper. The Gautama Buddha sat in silence, not to disconnect from the world, but to understand it. Monks across traditions withdrew into solitude, not because they rejected people, but because they wanted clarity before returning to them. Even thinkers like Henry David Thoreau went into isolation, not to escape society, but to observe it more clearly. Because distance creates perspective, and perspective creates understanding. That's the pattern, across time, across cultures, across philosophies. Solitude was never seen as weakness. It was seen as training, a way to sharpen the mind, to stabilize emotions, to strip away illusion. So when someone today chooses to be alone intentionally, they're not doing something strange. They're stepping into something ancient, something practiced, something powerful. And once you understand that, you stop seeing solitude as absence. You start seeing it as structure. But philosophy explains the idea. It shows us why solitude has always mattered. To really understand it, you have to look at what happens inside the mind. Because when someone chooses to be alone, something changes internally. And that's where it becomes real. Because here's the part that changes everything. Being alone and feeling lonely are not the same thing. You can be surrounded by people, talking, laughing, engaging, and still feel completely disconnected. And you can be sitting by yourself, in silence, and feel completely at peace. Carl Jung explained this in a way that cuts straight to the truth. He said loneliness doesn't come from having no one around you. It comes from being unable to express what matters to you. Think about that. It's not about quantity of interaction, it's about quality of connection. And for many people, most interactions don't reach that level. They stay on the surface. Small talk, polite responses, performative conversations, and over time, that creates a different kind of exhaustion. Not physical, psychological. Because you're constantly adjusting yourself, filtering your thoughts, matching energy, saying the right things. And eventually, you start losing track of what's actually yours. That's when solitude becomes attractive. Not because you want less connection, but because you want real connection. And to find that, you have to start with yourself. Psychologically, something important happens when you're alone. Your attention stabilizes. You're no longer reacting to external input. You're observing. Your thoughts slow down. Your emotions become clearer. You start noticing patterns. What triggers you, what drains you, what actually matters to you. And that awareness builds something most people lack, self-regulation. You're no longer pulled by every message, every opinion, every situation. You become selective, intentional, grounded, and there's more. Research consistently shows that people who are comfortable being alone tend to have stronger emotional control, better decision-making, higher levels of creativity, clearer identity, not because they avoid people, but because they've spent time understanding themselves. That's the difference. They're not escaping life. They're organizing it. And here's where it gets even more important. People who can sit with themselves don't depend on others to feel complete. They don't chase constant validation. They don't need attention to feel stable. They don't panic in silence because they've already built something internally. And that changes how they move through the world. They choose relationships instead of needing them. They engage instead of clinging. They walk away without collapsing. And that level of independence is often misunderstood. It can look like distance. It can look like disinterest. But in reality, it's clarity. Because they've learned something most people avoid. If you can't be alone with yourself, you'll never be stable with anyone else. And once that realization settles in, something deeper begins to happen. Because solitude doesn't just calm you, it reveals you. It starts showing you things you can't see when you're constantly distracted. And that's where the real shift begins. When the noise disappears, something else becomes impossible to ignore. Yourself. Not the version of you that speaks in conversations. Not the version that reacts to messages. Not the version shaped by expectations. The one underneath all of that. And at first, that can feel uncomfortable. Because without distraction, there's nothing to escape into. No scrolling. No conversation to fill the silence. No external input to guide your thoughts. Just awareness. And that awareness starts bringing things to the surface. Thoughts you've been avoiding, feelings you've been suppressing, questions you've never taken the time to ask. It's not always peaceful in the beginning. Sometimes it's messy, restless, unsettling, even confronting. Because now, you're not reacting to the world, you're facing yourself. But if you stay there, if you don't run from it, something shifts, slowly. Your thoughts begin to organize, your emotions begin to settle, your attention becomes sharper, because now you're no longer scattered, you're present. And in that presence, patterns start to appear. You begin to notice what drains you, what triggers you, what you've been tolerating, what you've been ignoring. And eventually, you ask a question most people never stop long enough to consider. Is this actually me? Or is this just the version of me I've adapted to be around others? That question changes everything because it separates identity from influence. It forces you to see what's yours and what's been shaped by environment, expectations, and constant interaction. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. You start making different choices. Not louder, not dramatic, but more aligned. You say less, but mean more. You engage less, but with intention. You tolerate less, but with clarity, because now you're not reacting. You're choosing, and that's the real shift. Solitude doesn't just give you peace, it gives you awareness. And awareness gives you control. Control over your time, your energy, your attention, which means you're no longer pulled in every direction. You're grounded, centered, deliberate. And once someone reaches that point, solitude stops feeling like separation. It starts feeling like power, not loud power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that doesn't depend on constant interaction, the kind that stays steady regardless of what's happening outside. But here's the tension. That kind of stillness doesn't fit easily into the world we live in, because the modern world is built on the opposite. Because once you experience that level of clarity, you start noticing something else. The world around you is constantly trying to pull you out of it. And that's where solitude stops being neutral and starts becoming something much bigger. Because here's the reality most people don't stop to see. The world you live in is not designed for stillness. It's designed for attention. Everything around you is built to pull you outward. Notifications, messages, feeds that never end, content that keeps refreshing. There is always something to respond to, something to check, something to consume. And over time, that becomes your normal. Constant input, constant reaction, constant movement. So when you step out of that, when you choose silence, it doesn't just feel different. It feels uncomfortable, almost unnatural, because you've been conditioned to stay engaged, to always be reachable, always visible, always responding. And when you're not, it creates tension. People notice, why haven't they replied? Why are they so quiet? Why are they pulling back? But here's what's really happening. You're breaking the pattern. You're stepping outside a system that depends on your attention, because attention today is currency. The more you give it away, the more you get pulled into the cycle. But the moment you stop, the moment you choose stillness over stimulation, you take that power back. Your focus returns, your thoughts stabilize, your time becomes yours again. And that's why solitude feels almost rebellious, because you're no longer reacting to everything, you're choosing what deserves your attention. And that's rare. Most people don't do that. They stay in the loop, scroll, react, respond, repeat, without ever stepping back to ask, is this actually adding anything to my life? But when you spend time in solitude, that question becomes unavoidable. And once you ask it, honestly, you start seeing things differently. What used to feel important starts to feel unnecessary. What used to demand your attention starts to feel like noise. And slowly, you begin to detach, not from life, but from distraction. And that's where the real shift happens. Because now, you're no longer overwhelmed, you're selective. And selectivity creates control. You're not consuming everything. You're choosing what matters. You're not reacting instantly. You're responding intentionally. And that changes how you experience everything. Even your relationships, even your time, even yourself. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Choosing this path has a cost. You become less visible, less available, less reactive, and not everyone understands that. Some people will misread it as distance, as disinterest, as withdrawal. But that's the trade-off, because when you step out of the noise, you lose visibility, but you gain something far more valuable, clarity. And clarity is what allows everything else to improve. Because once you stop reacting to everything, once you stop needing constant input, once you stop chasing attention, something deeper starts forming. Not just clarity, identity, a different way of moving, a different way of choosing. And that's where solitude stops being a habit and becomes part of who you are. At some point, solitude stops being something you do and starts becoming part of who you are. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that separates you from others, but in a way that changes how you move through everything. Because now, you're no longer reacting to life. You're choosing it. You're not engaging out of habit. You're engaging with intention. You're not surrounding yourself just to avoid being alone. You're comfortable enough to decide when connection actually matters. And that shift is quiet, but powerful, because it changes your entire relationship with the world. You stop chasing interaction. You stop forcing conversations. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. Instead, you become selective. Who you give your time to, who you listen to, who gets access to your energy. And that selectivity isn't arrogance, it's clarity. Because once you've spent time alone, really alone, you realize something most people miss. Not all connection is meaningful, not all relationships are aligned, and not all attention is worth your energy. So you stop accepting everything. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop tolerating things that drain you, and in that space, your standards rise. Not loudly, not aggressively, but naturally. Because now, you know what it feels like. To be grounded, to be calm, to be clear. And you don't want to lose that, so you protect it. And that's where real strength begins to show, not in what you say, but in what you no longer allow. You walk away sooner. You speak less, but with more weight. You listen more, but react less. Because you're no longer trying to control everything around you. You've learned to control yourself. And that changes how others experience you. You feel different, more stable, more composed, less predictable. Not because you're distant, but because you're centered. You're not pulled into every situation. You're not affected by every opinion. You observe first. You respond second. And that creates something rare. Presence. Real presence. Not the kind that demands attention, the kind that holds it, because people can feel when someone is grounded, when someone is not chasing, not reacting, not needing. And that energy is different. It's calm, but firm, quiet, but undeniable. And all of that comes from something simple. You learned how to be with yourself, without needing anything else. That's not isolation, that's self-mastery. And once someone reaches that level, something important becomes clear. Solitude was never the end goal, it was the foundation, because what comes next is not less connection, but better connection. Because in the end, solitude was never about being alone. It was about becoming whole. And that changes everything about how you connect with others. Because now, you're not entering relationships from a place of need. You're not looking for someone to complete you, to validate you, to stabilize you. You've already built that internally. So when you connect, it's different. It's not forced. It's not rushed. It's not based on filling a gap. It's based on alignment. You choose people who add to your clarity, not disrupt it. You choose conversations that go deeper, not just louder. You choose presence over proximity. Because now you understand something most people don't. You don't need everyone. You need the right people. And solitude is what showed you that. Because without it, everything blends together. Every interaction feels equal. Every connection feels necessary. But with solitude, you become selective, intentional, discerning. And that's where real connection begins. Not when you're constantly surrounded by people, but when you finally understand yourself well enough to recognize who actually fits into your life. Because now, you're not trying to belong everywhere. You're choosing where you truly belong. And that creates depth, real depth, the kind of connection that doesn't require performance, that doesn't need constant validation, that doesn't collapse under silence, because it's built on something solid: clarity, self-awareness, presence. And here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become being alone, the better your connections become. Because you're no longer afraid of losing them. You're no longer tolerating what doesn't align. You're no longer adjusting yourself to maintain something. You're showing up fully, and that's rare. Because most people are still performing, still adapting, still trying to be accepted. But when you've spent time in solitude, real solitude, you stop doing that. You stop chasing belonging, and instead, you bring it. You become the kind of person who creates depth, simply by being present. And that's the shift. Solitude doesn't disconnect you from life, it prepares you for it. So when you see someone sitting alone now, in a cafe, in a park, in silence, you don't see absence anymore. you see something else, something quieter, something stronger. And that leads us back to where we started. Because solitude was never emptiness. It was space. Space to think, space to feel, space to return to who they are without interruption. And most people never give themselves that. They stay in the noise. They stay in constant motion. They stay distracted, just enough to never have to face themselves fully. But the ones who choose solitude step out of that cycle. They sit in the quiet. They listen. They reflect. And in doing that, they build something most people don't even realize they're lacking: clarity. And from that clarity, everything changes. How they think, how they move, how they connect. They stop chasing. They stop performing. They stop trying to be everything for everyone. And instead, they become grounded, present, whole. And that's why they don't fear being alone. Because they've learned something most people spend their entire lives avoiding: their own company is enough. Not because they don't value others, but because they no longer depend on them to feel complete. And once you reach that point, you don't withdraw from life. You step into it fully, without noise, without pressure, without losing yourself in the process. So maybe solitude isn't something to avoid. Maybe it's something to understand, something to experience, something to protect. Because on the other side of it is a version of you that's clearer, stronger, and more real than anything the noise can create. And if something in this video resonated with you, don't ignore it. Take a moment, step back, give yourself space, even if it's just a few minutes. No phone, no distractions, just silence, and see what comes up, because that's where it starts. If this changed how you see solitude, leave a like. It helps more than you think. And if you know someone who might need this, share it with them. Sometimes the right message, at the right time, can change everything. And when you're ready to go deeper, to move from understanding to actually living this, check the next video, because nothing really changes until you do. I'll see you there.